I had a teacher in 8th grade, English teacher, pulled me aside. I'd written an assignment of some kind. And she took me on the hall and she said, I just need to tell you something. And I said, okay. And she said, I think you're a poet. And in my world and the way I was raised, that was not a compliment. That was first of all, I didn't understand what it meant. And it also, I really wanted her to say, you will be an excellent football player. That would have been perfect for my upbringing.
Yes.
You know? And but you think about how people implant things and give you gifts in their language. And I know when all the years later I started writing again, so at that point I'm in my 30s, I guess the voice that said I could at that time was her, saying, you can do this, you can write.
There has got to be more than this.
Welcome to the Morse Code Podcast, where we talk with entrepreneurially minded creatives in music, film, and writing. My name's Corby, and I'm hoping these conversations inspire you to push deeper into your own work, whether you're a full-time professional or just starting out on your own creative odyssey. We're less than a month out from our first ever Morse Code Podcast 6-month anniversary live show. It's happening Sunday, April 14th at the 5 Spot here in East Nashville. Many of the guests we've had on the show are performing that night. Guests like Jill Andrews, Bill Miller, Abigail Comps, and tons more. Grab your tickets at morsecodepodcast.com. Do it now. I think this might be your favorite Morse Code Podcast guest so far, especially if you're someone engaged in music or writing or those two things together. Barry Dean is one of the most successful songwriters working today. He has 4 #1 hit songs, multiple radio singles, and dozens of cuts. Accolades aside, Barry does that thing often touted but seldom shown. He makes you feel seen. What follows here is a thoughtful and nuanced instruction manual on how not only to have a successful career in music, but how to lift up the people around you, and most importantly, how to serve the song. If you get something out of the Morse Code Podcast, please take a second to like and subscribe. It really makes a difference. And now here's my conversation with Barry Dean. Barry Dean.
Yes.
Thank you for crossing the river and talking with the likes of us.
Glad to be here.
This is our second meeting, but I
right.
like to think that we've known each other for 10 years.
It feels like it. I mean, in a way. I mean, when we met, the first time we met, we stood in the parking lot and talked.
Yeah,
for a long time.
We did, and you were so gracious. At that time, I had a little book that had just gotten published, and I was like, Mr. Dean, would you mind if I gave this to you?
I was very honored.
You said as much, and it made me feel really grateful to you for just being so kind about that, because you're a busy guy and a successful guy, and I don't want to embarrass you, but for people who might not know, Barry Dean is a very, we're going to just say, a really successful songwriter who's got between 4 and 10 #1s, depending on which website you check. And there's a Spotify playlist that you can go to right now, and you can type in Barry Dean, and it'll say songs written by Barry Dean, and just start scrolling, and your thumb is going to get tired before you run out of songs that he's been part of. So you're an accomplished, not only talented guy, but a guy that's managed to put his talent to work for him in a really meaningful way. And as we talked about last night, a big part of this podcast is trying to help folks connect some of those dots within themselves. I mean, not the least of which me. A lot of us have a modicum of talent, but it's always a challenge to figure out how to find your place in the world. And from where I sit, you managed to have done that in some meaningful way. So I thought we'd start with, okay, so we were talking about how you grew up in small town Pittsburgh, Kansas, and had a yen at a young age to get into music. And where did that begin, and what did that look like?
I think I always loved music, and it probably comes down from my mother's side. My grandmother. I didn't learn until I was an adult and living here that she wrote hymns that were in some of the old hymnals they would use in churches way back. Nothing famous. She didn't write, whatever, it is well with my soul or anything. But the fact that she did that hadn't really been clear to me. It just, but music was always around. And
this was your grandma?
My grandmother and my mother was a piano teacher, and didn't teach me because I was a horrible student. And, but she, but there was always music around. And we grew up in a church tradition,
Sure.
I call it low church.
Yeah.
Because it had a little low ceiling and PV speakers and normally red carpet. And so music was a huge part of it. You were singing for your soul.
Yeah. And did your parents listen to secular music? Did they buy records too, or was it just church music?
That's the language, right? No, my mother, Elvis was allowed because he'd done those gospel records.
Naturally.
My dad loved those records, and my mother and Johnny Cash was allowed because he was friends with Billy Graham, and everything else was gospel music or classical or musicals on Broadway, or strangely jazz, because no one would do anything untoward while listening to jazz. And so jazz was allowed, and that's how I got a Billy Joel album when I was a boy, was he was holding a trumpet on the cover. And I said, he's jazz. And so it was 52nd Street.
Snuck that one through.
Yeah, but Dad would allow, every night, Charlie Rich was somehow, I don't know how that got through, but Charlie Rich was allowed. Olivia Newton-John, I have some sense of how Olivia got through. Dolly Parton, probably the same way.
Sure.
So,
amazing. A quick diversion. You just mentioned that Johnny Cash and Billy Graham thing, and I was listening to some of your songs earlier this morning, and that line, it's the George Strait cut.
Yeah.
That's got to be your line. About,
well, yeah, that comes from, Lori McKenna and Luke and I wrote, and we're great friends. And Lori's like, I don't know, my sister. And anyway, she goes, you got that picture down there. And I always say, you have to have, healthy country music should have really good Saturday night and really good Sunday as well. So you have to have a little, if you get too much of one or the other, we start to be weird, right? Like if it gets too perfect-y, everything's good and everything has a moral, then we're kind of missing out on the party, right?
Yeah,
but if it gets all beer and trucks, after a while you're like, somebody say something, please, for some other time than Friday night. And so I think a little healthy, and so I said something about God and country music, or I think she said the title, God and Country Music. And I said, how do you mean it? And she said, like your picture, like you always say. And then we just wrote that song incredibly quickly.
Wow.
Because she was like, and they obviously made it great. But I had enough material inside to just go to start writing and then share with the class.
Yeah, there's some great zingers in that. The darkness and the I saw the light. There's the lost in the found.
There's lost in the found. Yeah.
Yeah, that's brilliant writing.
So.
Okay, so you snuck some. You had a little smattering of some worldliness.
Yeah, and I had a babysitter in about 5th grade who listened to rock and roll radio in the summer, and I heard a song called Ebony Eyes by Bob Welch. He had just left Fleetwood Mac. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And he had a hit with Sentimental Lady. And he was a short time in Fleetwood Mac and was replaced by Lindsey Buckingham. And another good move. But that song hit. And so now I'm, every night when I get home from school, I'm putting on headphones and I'm plugging into the radio. The DJ was the young Bruce Elliott, and I would crawl under my bed and listen to rock and roll. And
that radio station was regional Kansas?
Yeah, KSDK, KMRJ. It later became Quick Rock.
And this is pre-Clear Channel, so that was those DJs, that music programmer. Set your imagination afire in small town Pittsburgh, and you thought, wow, the world's a big place. And where was the connection between like the world's a big place and I want to be part of it?
Well, I think music got bigger and bigger. I had teachers who would encourage me, and so I started learning different instruments and playing, and then in our tradition, church was where you played music. Yeah. That's how you would do that. But there were lots of characters in that little town, as I guess there are in every city and every town, but these are mine, that mattered. So there was the neighbor, the guy who lived next door. He was moving out, but he played drums in the rock band. And he left a drum kit for a couple of months for me to try out, and they put it in the garage so I could bang around on that. And different teachers would introduce me to other kinds of music, and so I just kept kind of growing. And then, as you would do, you started playing in the church house band, and the church music was, it's like 70s holdover music, basically, but it was like a Santana concert. It was pretty loose.
Bread. I remember being a band from the 70s.
Yes, Bread. David Gates of Bread, and so we had drums, and we had all. It was not the high church kind of music. It was a low church music with long choruses and kind of predating where we end up now in certain kinds
pre-praise and worship.
Pre-praise and worship, that's right. But it was a Santana concert. We had guitar players and drummers and sax players and synths, and once we had synths, and so it was kind of one of those deals. But always I was kind of fascinated with records, and I thought that, just like most people's story from my era, you're staring at record covers, you're trying to figure out who these people are and how come they're on this one and this one and this one, and you start trying to figure out if you can sound like them, or maybe I'll write a song, maybe I'll try to write a song. And I remember starting in my teen years thinking maybe I'd like to write a song, and trying to write songs, and they were horrible.
Sure.
And but I like doing it. So,
how old were you when you wrote your first one?
That I know of, I was probably 15, 14 or 15. I was also, I would go out I never really talk about this, but I would go out in the dark and feed the dog, and you have to walk out in the dark. And I would get kind of rattled. You ever do that where like you're going upstairs in some place you've never been, and you just kind of get the willies, so you go faster, which is the worst, right? Because now you're going to lose it, right? If once you start giving in to the crazy, it'll take it. And so I would write songs. I would just constantly make up songs. I didn't think about it as songwriting, but I look back on it and go, oh, there was always this part of you processing your world. That's really what it is.
There's a book, Woody Guthrie's autobiography, Bound for Glory, and he talks about, he's from Oklahoma, so near your neck of the woods. And similarly, isolated background, but I just remember him describing the first time there was like a traveling band that came through, and he was just at the age where he's like kind of aware of what's going on. And the book's full of like little jottings of lyrics. Wow. And there's a little excerpt in it. He said, I wrote my first song. I said, listen to the music, 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 listen to the music, music, band. And it's just like, that's kind of same thing. It sounds like, you had a version of that where you're sort of like assembling your experience into something that like a song you didn't quite know.
That's right. I didn't understand, I'm processing my world that way. I had a teacher in 8th grade, English teacher, pull me aside. I'd written an assignment of some kind. And she took me on the hall and she said, I just need to tell you something. And I said, okay. And she said, I think you're a poet. And in my world and the way I was raised, that was not a compliment. That was first of all, I didn't understand what it meant. And it also, I really wanted her to say, you will be an excellent football player. That would have been perfect for my upbringing.
Yes.
Poet was a word I just didn't even understand. I'd heard of Robert Frost.
You're a wizard.
Yeah. No, it was really oh man, I thought that was going to be positive. But you think about how people implant things and give you gifts in their language. And I know when all the years later I started writing again. So at that point I'm in my 30s. I guess the voice that said I could at that time was her saying, you can do this, you can write. And I understood more what some of the words meant, and I had learned some things, but I look at it and think, wow, it's amazing how often somebody will speak something into you, and you think, I don't even know if I agree with that. And then later it becomes a little bit of fuel to go to the next voice that tells you, well, let's try that, I can do that.
So you traveled, it was 30 when you left town, I think that we were saying earlier.
Yeah, when I came to Nashville, I was 38. I had signed my deal a year and a half before, and I'd been coming to town a couple of years before that. So
to write or have meetings, or
to
both?
Write and have meetings. Yeah, well, really to have meetings. I didn't really know very many people to write with, and very few people wanted to write with a guy coming in from Kansas.
Sure.
Back then it was, you had to live here. You needed to be a guitar player. There were some general rules of it, and I was breaking pretty much all of them. And so
you write on piano
at that time. I started taking guitar lessons from Ellen Britton here. A lot of people know her. She's a great teacher. And I'd take these 3-hour lessons and record them, and then go home and woodshed. And I decided this is a horrible strategy. I hope no one will ever try this kind of thing. I decided that I would never tell anyone I was a keyboard player, and I would get my deal as a guitar player. So I was following that rule, and I was following this rule, and it was really kind of a dysfunctional way of approaching it.
Why do you think that is? I mean, it's too easy to get a publishing deal straight with the instrument that you know how to play.
No, it makes me nervous just saying it out loud, because it's such a foolish thing. If my friends or my son was doing that, I'd be like, what? No, to use all the things you have. Be all of you, right? I mean, I hear that when I'll be with someone and they'll say, well, I only write this kind of song or that kind of song. And I'll think, why? Why are you saying that? You're so incredible. And I know you love, a lot of people will say, well, I only write serious, depressing songs, and I can't write fun songs. Well, I understand that way of thinking, but there was this moment where I realized I was disconnected as a person, because as someone was telling me about a song, and it was a wonderful song, but it was very sad. And I said, I don't really like to listen to sad songs. I like fun songs and dance songs. And they all laughed, because all I was known for when I first got signed was writing these super deep, I was killing a lot of people in my songs. Yeah. I mean, they were super sad songs. A lot of them were very personal, very autobiographical. And so I was kind of known as the heavy song guy. And and then I realized that is funny. Why would I say that? Because I'm over here listening to everything with a beat and only writing this side of me. But there's two sides.
You were serious when you said that. You weren't joking.
No, I was serious. I was like, it's too sad. I don't like to listen to sad songs very much. Which is not true. If I had to list my top 10 songs, I guarantee they're all sad.
Ballads,
it's going to be this and this, Randy Newman. It's always going it's going to be angsty.
Yeah.
So much angst. And but that changed how I wrote, because then I started pondering, why can't I write anything I want to write? Why can't I write things I actually care about? I like fun. I like laughing. I'm not just dour. And so then I started doing that. And strangely, then it took a turn, and the next thing I knew, everybody thought I was a summer songwriting guy, like the party song guy.
How early into the Nashville chapter of your journey did that occur? That you pivoted?
I mean, probably, if I've been here like, I don't know, 18, almost 19, 20 years, probably it happened 10 years in. I mean, it should have happened sooner. Barry should be a lot smarter than he is, but he's not. So.
Well, we're stuck with you.
We're stuck with me. This is me. This is how I am.
And so did you, when you got your deals, and I do like to keep this the more like abstract and philosophical, but just for specific sake for a second, did you come to town with, a burned CD of a couple of songs you'd written or 5 songs you'd written, solo rights, that kind of thing?
That's what I had.
You had some publishing meetings, you played them. Yeah,
I did. I had some friends who hooked me up with a meeting or two, and then through the open mic, Barbara Cloyd and Liz Hingber and Jen Schott and George Taryn were all people who, I know I'm forgetting people right now, that set up meetings for me or introduced me to someone, and then I would play a song for them. And I was different, I wrote by myself, and, it didn't sound like the radio, and I kind of knew it. And so I was really happy when I met, in fact, I played for a great guy, Scott Gunner, who was at Almo Irving, and he would listen to my songs and didn't necessarily like all of them, but he would listen to them. And then I played one, and he said, "Do you know what your songs are about?" And I said, "I guess I've never thought of it like that." And I hadn't. I would wait for just what I would call a pure inspirational moment. I didn't have a process where I was always creating and always open to it. It was more of a focus. It had to overwhelm me. And so sometimes when that happens, you're not thinking big picture. You're just in this flow, right? You're writing through it, writing it down, not writing at it. And So I said, no, I guess I hadn't thought of it. And then he said, you're kind of living out there in Poetryville. And I said, well, I never thought of it like that. And I really did think of myself as a music guy. And so he said, you need to meet Chris Oglesby over at BMG. And so I went over and met Chris. And he said, he's going to be your best friend. He's going to love you. And he was great to me. And he signed me.
He was kind of the turning point or turning point.
He's who signed me to BMG. And I remember that first meeting where we were talking about who I would write with. And, my list of co-writes was like 3.
Yeah.
And so he said, well, who do you want to write with? And I said, well, I would think, he's writing, I would think a lyricist because I'm not a word guy. And he looked up and he goes, what do you mean? Oh, no, I'm a music guy. And he goes, yeah, you're a both guy. And you should know outside this room, just don't say what guy you are. And I appreciate him doing that because sometimes I will hear people go, I'm just a music guy. And I'm always like, I doubt it. I know, let's talk. Let's hear what do you feel about this? If somebody's willing to be honest about it, I understand what they're saying. I feel most comfortable in that place. This is what I've been rewarded for. This is how I approach and work my way into the forest and through it. So I get that, and I'm a lyric guy. I was explaining it to someone once, and I said, if right now someone said to us, good news, Paul McCartney will be here in 3 minutes to write a song with you. Each of us would go to what we deeply believe is where we are the most stable. We would go to a horse stance, if you will, for writers. And when I first started, I would say I would have gone to the piano. And now I would say I would grab a pen and a piece of paper because I would start organizing thoughts. Where am I? What do I think? What's happening? My friend Luke Laird would start immediately making beats and sounds. That's where he would go. And I've never asked him what he would do, but I think that's what he would do. And we all have that place where somewhere in here that's where we find our solid. And so at the time it was music, but over time, after writing lots and lots of days, on Music Row, there was a moment where I realized that I'd never left a co-write where we didn't have music. And especially in country where, it's a little more directed musically, I think is what I would say. There's not as much latitude, There's the old joke. There's whole rafts of jokes that the musicians can make about that. But there is a bit of a template to it. And I'm saying it nicely. And but lyrically, they'll let you get away with a lot of things, or they used to in country music, and I still think it's there. And so I just knew we always left with music, and the thing that always bogged us down was, what is it about? What do we want to write about? What do we want to say? And I just thought, I'm going to work on this. There's no reason for us to have all this talent in a room and not leave with it. Our hearts are right. We all want to communicate. We want to work together, and we want to make something good. So I'm going to work to be better and provide ideas and lyrics and help, I don't know, kind of like the essence of a showrunner, in LA, where you're like, if I have to write it, I write it. If I'm just helping direct it, I direct it. If I'm the music guy, I'll be the music guy. I'm just going to serve this room today.
That speaks to the fact that you're a really collaborative-minded creator. Yeah. And that's probably, I'm guessing, and I'm going to frame this as a question, was that a skill that you had to learn as you started co-writing with people?
Yeah, I would say yes. I mean, my wife is interesting because she pointed out to me that even in my work life, in my past, before I was a songwriter professionally, when I lived and worked in that company, my approach was always to build a team, that it wasn't just about me, it was about working with other people. And I do love that, even in sessions here, I go to sessions sometimes and I'll see people at sessions. Everybody's got their own way of working, but I'll see people at sessions and either they're not particular about the musicians, which is unfathomable to me. I love them so much. Even if they're different than what I tend to go to, I still think it's amazing. So I like the idea that you get to work with these incredible people. And then I'll see another group of people that will go, and so they'll have this person playing keyboards, and they'll go and show them what to play. And I'll think, well, what was the point of all this? Just play it. If you feel it that strongly, put it down, and we'll use that. We'll cut to that. Let everyone run around this thing that you feel is burning. But if not, if we've decided we're going to assemble these brilliant people in this room, let's show it to them. Let's trust them with something. Let's give them, let's take them seriously, and they'll take it. I've seen them. They'll take us seriously too.
There's a great analogy to be made there between in the film world with directors and actors, where especially writer-directors will sometimes have a heavy hand, say, in the production side of it. And there's famously, like, the worst thing you can do as a director is to give an actor a line read. Say it like this.
Say it like this.
That would be the equivalent,
right?
know? Whereas
yeah.
if you cast the right group of people, man, it's gonna be different than how you have it in your head. And
right.
You gotta, a prudent director, I feel like, trusts that choice early on that he made in casting that particular lineup of people.
I was so intimidated by these musicians in the sessions, and they were so gracious to me. I mean, I have very few, all I have are stories of them helping and encouraging. And I've taken to now where I go in the tracking room, and there's headphones out there for me, because I find it's just easier. I feel more comfortable just whispering in the room with them. Yeah, like I saw Tim. I love Tim Lauer, and you had him on, and it was so great. But I'm thinking of Tim. Sometimes I've said to Tim, I don't know how to say it. I was trying to say, this hurts me. Or, she sounds really pretty when she's singing it, but if you listen to what she's saying, she's angry. Can you help me? And he's so good at interpreting that. And they all are, but I'm just thinking of Pants right now, and just thinking of, his approach to things. He's, but they're like that, where they're very generous. And again, I've not produced a lot of stuff, done a lot of demos. I jokingly produced 2 albums and then retired. And so I did a Laurie McKenna album, and then I did a Travis Meadows Killing Uncle Buzzy record. And,
awesome. And
those were my 2 forays into it. And every now and then, like, I guess we did a Christmas record with Laurie, and I'll do vocal production I did some stuff for commercial. But most of my production tended to be, surprisingly to me, very organic and very, considering where I'm writing most days is a very commercial environment. When we got ready to do Laurie's record was first. She'd just come out of her major label deal, and I think our fans felt like, what happened to where did she go? She was still there, but they liked Bittertown had been her big hit record through. They had cut her into Nashville, and then she did a commercial record, and then I don't know if she was thinking she was going to do another one, but I got to be.
Which one was that?
It was called Lorraine. It was a really difficult time. She lost her best friend, sister-in-law, and she was wrestling with things. And so it's kind of a quiet, dark, beautiful record that she created. And I did learn something there, because we did the first few down in the basement. I don't know if this applies. At Universal, there wasn't a budget. It was just an independent record for someone from Boston. She is now the Laurie McKenna, but she was. We knew she was who she was, but it had not been revealed to everyone yet. And so anyway, we.
It's like way pre-Humble and Kind.
Pre-Humble and Kind, pre-Girl Crush, and so we went and in fact, off that EP and record is a song called Luxury of Knowing that Keith Urban cut, and that was kind of. She'd had McGraw and Faith Hill cuts, though, so she was obviously very successful. But that concept of, we're dealing with one of the greats, hadn't really locked in.
She, to me, occupies such an interesting and unusual space, because she came out of that Boston folk singing ethos, which is a different animal.
Yes.
And I don't know if there's been a person before or since that really crossed, like, so effortlessly transitioned that kind of aesthetic into something that Nashville just like can't get enough of.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that had to do with like her collaborations with you and Luke.
Oh.
Because she's, you know, you guys are everybody's freaking arty. But she's, you know, she comes at it. She's so she writes those tone poems, those character studies. Her songs are,
That's
you
right.
know, in a different way than the
That's
country
right.
thing. And I wanted you talked about how if your horse stance is the pen.
Yeah, no,
and
it is.
what does that look like? Do you have a pocket of titles? That's a terrible way of putting it.
That's all right.
But I mean, it's, you know, I write to title. When I do my co-writes, or even if I'm sitting there trying to come up with something, it's not always, but definitely with a co-write, because it helps you aim at something.
Yes.
Is that what you kind of start with, or will you write
I
a course
do
first?
in the mornings. I'll do morning pages or object writing or some sort of experience in the morning, and I do meditations about things and prayers, and I think everybody has some sort of a ritual, even if it's just I always drink 3 cups of coffee. There's something that you do to steel yourself for the day, and then most of my writing is collaborative. You know, I mean, with other people. Sometimes an artist in the room. So I do keep, you know, like most people on my phone, I have titles or things I like. I go a little further. I keep a folder full of papers of where I've written things that are more long form. That something just kind of came to me and I just start writing. And I don't know where it goes. I call them fireflies in a jar. Most of them are dead. But then every now and then a little bud will light up and you'll be like, wait a minute, what is this? And so I kind of keep those papers there. I have my titles here. And then
you bring these to the session?
Yeah, to the right.
So you come to the session with a bit
I have a bag. Yeah, I have a little bag, and I've got my folio, and then I've got, and I one of the things I had to do was actually learn to write on computer. That was very unnatural for me, to not music but words. And now I really like writing on the computer because I can move fast, and I can have multiple things. Whereas if I had to track it, I get more precious if it's in a big. Like I love beautiful journals. But then I get kind of precious about scratching stuff out, and it bothers me.
Yeah,
a little
the
bit.
mark up the ink. Oh, I can so relate to that.
And so it's kind of one of those deals. And so I learned to write on the computer, and so my process now is different than it was in the beginning. I had a title, and I would pre-write whole chunks, and I would show up, and I would share chunks. And every now and then I still do that, and sometimes those make it through. But then the other thing I started doing...
Is there a melody with these chunks?
Normally, yeah. And sometimes I'll write something to a melody, and then I'll show it first as words, and they'll start writing, they'll sing something completely different.
And you'll let that...
Yeah, and I had to learn to do that. I had to learn to let, because I mean, I don't know how you process this, but you know, that's really hard to hand half the baby over and trust that person, but it made me start considering who I wrote with and how I would treat them. If I didn't, I have to be able to surrender that and open my hand. And then the other thing I do is normally we'll start talking, and you'll say something or something will be in the room, and sometimes there'll be some sparks on it. Somebody will say a thing. And I'll just, like God and Country was like that, just to use that. She said, you know, it has this title, God and Country Music, and, you know, like your picture, and da-da-da. And so they talked for a minute, and then Luke was like, are you thinking we go after George Strait, or are you thinking we go after this? And they're talking, and I hear them, but I felt it. Something hit me. And you know what I'm talking about. When it sort of, somebody says, well, that's the price of turkey at the market. And for some reason...
There's an association all of a sudden.
Yeah, whatever. On that particular day, that seemed like the greatest idea. It just, poosh, what happened? And you know right where you want to go with that. You know right what you want to do. And so what I used to do was go, price of turkey in the market. Now I will throw that out and await whether we will work on that. These days, I'll just write everything that comes out. And it's bursts for me. I think there are really genius people who write whole songs, but it'll be a little chunk. And then maybe we won't even do that song. But then they turn back and they say, what if we did God and Country Music? well, what if God and country music was about being lost and being found and being this and then I read a little screed, a little confused blurb.
Mm-hmm.
It's like throwing stuff on the wall. And sometimes people are like, no. And that happens
Which is
more often
helpful
than
too. I mean,
yeah,
it's like
right. Well, at least we know, and then we can,
Yeah.
okay. And normally by having, then some places will call it the straw man, by having the straw man out, some people will go, yeah, yeah, and it'll light up the room. And sometimes they'll be like, no, like this.
Mm-hmm.
And it lets you know where we are and where I can help
Mm-hmm.
and what needs to happen next. And so, and I would say a lot of my writes these days, and there are fewer, I normally write, I like to try to write 140, 150, 160 songs a year. And because of all the things going on, I'm older and I have kids and I have company, I'm writing a third of that, So for me, that's kind of embarrassing to say, but it's true. And but I still feel like that experience that I'm going through right this season makes me love writing more than I've ever loved it and feel like I belong here more than I've ever belonged, and makes me sort of that irritating guy who thinks today is Christmas, like that we get to write, right? Because a lot of times people show up and they're kind of used to it. And what's the playwright? Is it Stephen Fry? Or there was a playwright who had a play with a priest in it and said he was dead to the cloth he worked in. And some days, we can run a little too hard to where we forget that we are allowed to work with incredible people and create. And not everybody gets to do that. Mm-hmm. And, so I try to, I think I really am that irritating guy now who's like, oh, let's write, but I have not always been that guy. I have been the guy that showed up and was like, what are we doing? Who's looking? That kind of thing.
This is so fun. And I think this is a kind of burning, mumbled question that I'm going to try to articulate, because you're such a great person to have a take on it. But something that I notice with artists, and being one myself, and being on my own particular journey of this burning need to express this inarticulated feeling or massive feelings inside, to express that and then have it connect with the world. So there's that piece of it, and there's a thing in artists that it's I want it to be my perspective. I wanted to this is my song. And a lot of, the tribe that I come from, a lot of us over here, these people that we write songs from our heart with a lack of awareness or even concern with its, where it will land or who it will connect with.
Yes. And
there's the kind of artists that I have been drawn to over the years. Neil Young's an example, where the songs aren't separable in a way from the person singing and playing them. Mm-hmm. I've very much come from that animal,
Sure.
And there's certain artists, I think of like Daryl Scott's a great example of somebody who's an amazing player, singer, deliverer, performer, whose songs are very much his perspective, and some, he's had some huge hits that other people have cut. Maybe my question is, did you have a journey similar to that? Were you conscious of the evolution in yourself from being a solo writer to a collaborative co-writer? Or was this something that sort of you noticed in the past? I'm like, oh, I'm a guy who helps other people.
I think it was, it took a while to see that. But there is, even in country commercial music, there was an era of songwriters who were, they're the figure. They're the flame, and then they have artists that cut their songs. But I'm thinking of Dean Dillon. Okay, I mean, Dean is one of the greatest. But if you've ever seen Dean Dillon, I mean, he is his own dude, right? Like, he is an artist in himself. But Teresa Berg is a fire within herself, And there's a whole bunch of these that are that kind of just brilliant. They're still being an artist when they're writing. They're still being an artist if they're just walking down the street. They just have that magnetism and that sort of internal flame that is going on. And then I think this newer group, or maybe I shouldn't speak to the young people now because they get their own voice, but the group I came in with, we were a lot more serving the room. We were serving the, like Ingrid writes her view of the world. And I know she's doing the musical now, and that's amazing. But if you look at the records in the era I was in, it was what she wanted to say. Those were her songs and her statements about them.
And for people listening, did you just co-write Girls Chase Boys with Ingrid?
Girls Chase.
Just the two of you?
And Trent Dabbs.
And Trent, another amazing writer.
And that's how I met her, was through Trent, and so thankful to that. And but even that Trent's a great example. I wrote with Sugar and the High-Lows with him and Amy, and I like music that is very mainlined. Like it's coming from the person. I had to say it. I just said recently to a young artist I was working with, I only want you to say it if you'll die if you don't. What is it you want to say? Because that's what I love about artists, is that feeling that they dared to say it. They dared to, whether it's Amy Mann or early Randy Newman or or John Hyatt. Some of the just like. And there's some of those songs you're like, it's not just Have a Little Faith in Me, it's Wreck of the Barbie Ferrari. I mean, who dares to do that? But that's what he wanted to do.
So this is crazy coming from the guy who wrote Daydrinking.
Right.
So how do you square those two
same guy
approaches?
Same guy. And for a long time, I really was trying to figure out how to do that. And that's where I go back to what I was talking about like, that the fan of those bands and those artists, and so I remember literally locking up and not being able to talk to Matthew Perryman Jones, if you know him.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know him because the chance I had to talk to him, I went and walked away. So I am a fan of singer-songwriters. I totally get that. And so ballads and songs that have this, not just ballads, songs that have a root in, I'm not trying, I'm just saying what I had to say, by God, this is my painting. I still write those kind of songs. And sometimes I write them with artists or other writers, and sometimes I write them and turn them in. Those normally haven't gotten cut a lot. Reba cut one, Martina cut one of those. The Reba cut, in a million years, I never thought anybody'd hear it. It was an accident that my publisher heard it because a friend of mine burned the CD off my computer that I brought to Nashville. And that's how it got heard, and he played it for Reba. And the next thing you know, I had a Reba cut. But in a million years, I still don't understand. It's literally 3 A sections, a B section, and another A section. That's the song. It says the title in the first sentence and the last sentence. That's it. And to quote Don Schlitz when he called me and talked to me about it, do you ever plan on rhyming? Because it wasn't written that way. It was written because it poured out. And Schlitz said his mentor told him, I think his mentor was Bob McDill, that God gives you 8 songs a year, and the others you got to write by yourself. And I think there's a little bit of truth to that. But going back to how does that guy write Daydrinking? Well, the answer is that guy is overcome with whatever the emotion is and willing to be a fool for it. And if it's, I wrote a song about recently with a guy about his father, and I sat in the room and cried with him. He wasn't crying. I was crying for what we were writing about. He was emotional, but I was really, I'll go with you if that's where you want to go. And in that case, Troy Verges had that title, and we were writing with Little Big Town, and I'll tell you, we had a little piece of music to throw at him. Like, what do you think of this vibe? And I had, what do you think of this vibe? And Troy called his vibe Daydrinking. And I called my vibe Texas Rain, I think it was called. My point was Texas Rain is not very useful. It just rusts things, and then it goes away, and then it's hot again. And so I thought that was a good idea.
That's pretty poetic.
Yeah, right. And so we played them, and I remember Jimmy going, I like Daydrinking with that vibe. And so then, for me, there's several things I do to try to make sure I stay honest in that. But But again, I'm just telling that story. And it took, like we said, 7 to 10 years before I made peace with the two halves of me, the half that can listen to whatever is the current pop song that my kids are dancing to and love that for what it is, and that still needs to go and listen to Red Rain or Lord, Here Comes the Flood from Peter Gabriel and sit in the room and vibe on that, and that's the same guy. And so, and then there's another component that I think sometimes people don't know exist, which is I don't get to choose where they go. That's the part of the commercial songwriter side that I think a lot of people don't think about, which is, so I wrote X number of songs with this artist, and I wrote this one that's a masterpiece. I'm proud. I would play that for you. And I wrote this one that was pretty sexy. This is really good for that artist. And then I wrote this one because the road manager got drunk and threw up and said something funny, and so we wrote a funny song just to do that. And then we wrote another song that I think is really good, real good country song. Mm-hmm. If he chooses to cut the song we wrote for the road manager about partying and throwing up, now I'm on that ride. That's the one he chose, and it's his record, and he's got to go out and play 300 dates, and he's got to stand for it. That's what he needed. And at first, those kinds of things, you go like, how in the world? This is obviously the good song, the okay song, and the horrible song, but not for him, because he has a career, and he had a plan for where that went in his set, and what he needed to do to achieve what his career goals were. Mm-hmm. And that took a minute to process and go, I see. My part is to serve this room and write all the songs we're going to write. And then, did I advise, this is the one, listen to that? Yeah, he didn't do that. And in that exact situation, he cut one, and I'm thankful to have a song on his record, and it went great. And then one of the sexy song got cut by another artist and became a number one song. And then this song never got cut. And that's the one that I would have told you, look at this. Mm-hmm. This is Springsteen, but with an Americana. And slightly, I could explain the nuance of my incredible creation, but that wasn't the one that got out. So you have to sort of live with, Daydrinking is great. I put whistling in it. I thought Karen was trying to whistle in the song. I thought that's a great idea. And she was just trying to show me a melody. So awkward. But we had whistling in it, and then off it went. And so
when you say something like that, he didn't cut the masterpiece, she didn't cut the masterpiece song, I want to say yet at the end of that. I mean, is there a yet with some of these songs in your back catalog? Did they live to rise another day unforeseen? Or
they sure do. Sometimes you'll write a song. I went to London and wrote, and I say that like, oh, that's so normal. Not normal. Been there twice to write. And but I went and wrote with Steve Robson and Don Mescal from Ireland. And I think it's okay to say, I think they were very disappointed. It was a writing camp that they drew me. They were like, all the celebrities were there, and then they drew me. And they're like, who's this guy? He's totally unknown and not successful, and he's from Nashville. Great. So I went in, and I don't know if it was Don or Steve had the title of Sunday Drive. And honestly, this is when I changed how I wrote lyrics too. Because before then, I was very constrained, and I would try to have the right answer is how the fastest way I can get there. Mm-hmm. So I would, what is the title? Okay, the title is this, and collaboration. Okay, working together. And I would write all these things until I could figure out the right answer that you might want. And then I would share that. On this day, I knew like they're both brilliant in their own things, and here I was. And I was a wah-wah to them. And so they say, we want to write a song about Sunday Drive. And I say, you're driving with your parents and you're watching the world through the windows, and the trees are lined up like dominoes or something. Yes. So they wrote that down. And I was so used to kind of the way I'd been kind of taught in my first trips to Nashville. You'd say, like, if you'd say, I want to say, you know, I'm lonely as Santa's pub on Tuesday morning. And then we'd all go, what's a cool way to say that?
Yeah.
Right? What's a cool way to do that? And now I would go, tell me more. You mean like, and I would just continue collaborating. Yes, and is what I would be doing. And I would be making sure I captured, whether recording or typing, as much of what you are generating around your energy on this. If there's a reason you think you want to say it, you know, like I always use the green mug, especially on this day. I might go, what is that? Tell me why. Oh, I just say that. Yeah, why do you say that? Well, the green mug is not important, but it turns out there's probably a lot there. And instead of sitting in the room going, what is our idea? What's the opening line? I'm going to start immediately trying to find, hopefully not in an irritating way, but find that truth. And these guys taught me that, because I was still thinking, we're just getting the outline of what the song is. And they're like, no, that's what we want to say. What else? And I was like, oh, no, I'll play organ while you play piano. No, tell us more about, well, I'm just thinking of my parents, and, you know, like sometimes you catch them holding hands and do this. Well, we end up writing this song, you know, it's 4 minutes long. It's a ballad. And we come back from London. I think they pitched it to one country artist, and she liked it. And one time at the Bluebird had me play it, but then said I could never cut it because it's not a single. And so that was the end of that song, really, except I would play it sometimes. The tape copy guy, when we came back from London, was Brett Eldridge. And he gets a deal, and he does several records, and then he's kind of changing where he's going. And he's told all the public producers up to that point, but nobody, you're too young. But this producer, you know, was like, let's cut it. And they cut Sunday Drive, and it became the title track, and he performed it and put it out, and he had known about this song for a decade.
It's crazy.
I couldn't believe it.
And he was in the room when he
had saved it, and he listened to it, and when I would see him, he would say, you know what song yours I love Sunday Drive. But it's just interesting, like, yeah, the songs do stay, and they go where they're going to go over time, and they show up in these strange places, and certain ones become really more meaningful, and some are just not as, right?
Just songs.
Yeah. But you look at paintings. Painters do the same thing. They make a lot of paintings of the chapel or whatever.
It's so inspiring to think of that, because so many people feel like when they're making something and they release it and it doesn't get the plays, the streams, or whatever, it's like, what's the point? And it's like the story is never over with a piece of art that lives in the world. It's never over, and you may not be there when it sees the fireworks display that you envisioned for it when you made it. But I find that to be, some people want to be present for the win. I think it's solace enough for me to know that, you know, I love this. There's something in this song.
Right. And the win may come in a shape that you're not sure how to handle. Like, imagine if you wrote a song and you put it out and it didn't do what you wanted it to do, and then they used it in some crazy movie and it becomes known by everyone and loved. Now you've got to deal with it, because in your mind it really sets up the trilogy in my record, and it does this thing, and they don't know about that. They're using it to celebrate this other thing. I think that happens more often than we know, you know, that it's being used in a way or heard in a way. We've heard all the stories of like a ballad that people have at their wedding that's actually super creepy, you know, or what? But for some reason it became special.
That's I love that idea, and I'm thinking about, like, with the singer-songwriters and the insular approach that we sometimes have to making our thing, and it's like it's us on the stage singing the song, and there's this whole world. And when you say something like that, it reminds me of, like, with the country world with there's just like this, all of this, it's a circus going on. It's constantly changing, and people's are looking for this song today, and this guy got this new deal. Oh, she lost her deal. It's just a whirling vortex of possibility. The same with like the film world and all of these things. When there's a lot of people involved in a project or a song or a movie or an industry, there's a lot of moving parts, and with moving parts come possibility. And I think that for us, I'll speak for myself as a songwriter, it's been important for me to learn, and I've learned this later in my career, to look up and look around and see how I can be of service to that which is around me, apart from me being on stage. And this is a dawning awareness that began maybe 10 years ago. But I think with that, there's so much more possibility, not only for the songs that you write from your heart, but also to serve people and to help other people find meaning in their own lives, which is a huge part of what every person, what leads to every person to write a songwriter or row writer or novel writer or whatever. Yeah. So I find this to be very inspiring, Barry.
That's good. I mean, your podcast is. I mean, I was listening to the Genius in the Walls comment. I told you about that, and I was like, oh, I hadn't heard that, but I totally understand that. And there is, and you talked about film, the writers, and that includes the songwriters, lead us to next eras. So whatever is next, someone is already doing it, and it seems very strange.
The screen production is downstream from
That's right. That's right. And so there was a conscious effort before the lockdown to start writing more country. We were missing country, and you could see it because all of a sudden everyone was buying gut string guitars, and then lo and behold, we heard the rubber bridge guitar, and it was like a gut string guitar, but not really. So off we went, and what was really going on? We wanted to feel more of it. We wanted it to be more personal. We needed it to matter more to us, and I think. It's always going to go. There was a moment where everything was a track in country music, and now demos, tracks not as great. We want to hear a band, or we want to hear a work tape, and so it's kind of pushed back away from that. And so there's always going to be seasons in art, especially when you're dealing with commercial production. There's always we cannot get back the use of the wah-wah at certain eras in music. But then there's other places where it's the greatest thing that ever happened in the history of the world. When Stevie Wonder does it, it's phenomenal. David Gates and Bread, there's some moments there that are a little heavy, so but it's okay, and I think there is this element too of, I've never said this, and it's probably a huge mistake, but so when I was a sophomore in high school, I had this Christian rock band that was neither. And so we went on a little tour, and my parents were quite concerned. And so when I got back, they had signed me up for Catholic school, and we're not Catholic at that time. So it was punishment, really. And the nuns were going to teach me discipline, and they did try. And so I went there. And what was interesting to me was I always thought, not to get super wacky, but the church I went to, it was very much Jesus was your buddy for sure, and he was, as they say, in the tuxedo T-shirt, and over at the Catholic school, he was a very big God, big high ceiling God. Over here, PV speaker God, and I always used to think, gosh, if they could each get a glimpse into each other's faith, their traditions. It could really help them both. It could heal things that maybe have been left behind, because the independent artist is this magical thing. I mean, we buy the record because this voice, and Lori is this way. We were talking about Lori McKenna. She's a little bit the voice crying in the wilderness, right? The only thing she can't do is she can't lie, and she does not need to dominate someone else to do that. She is the kindest view of art that we've ever heard. I mean, I think in a lot of years, She somehow loves other people's art. She's not jealous of other people's art. I wish I could say I had all those attributes. I don't, but I learned them from my sister, and I'm glad she's there. And she is absolutely, I believe, credible in all the regards. And yet, she loves writing commercial music with artists almost every day, whether in Boston or on Zoom or in the room. She just loves that process. She hates the recording studio, hates it, does not like to be there, frustrated that there's all this talent and we can't write another song. She is purely pouring songs out of her soul. Didn't really start doing that officially till she's much older. And so we have that in common, that we understood we had kept so much inside for so long that the idea that we could express it was this great gift. And so I feel like for the, I don't feel the river as much as probably some people do. And I on both sides. I mean, I think there are people who, they only want to write what is number 3 and above on the charts. And if that has a truck with a special dually attachment on it, then that's what I have to, all my songs have to have that. Got it. I totally understand. But there's always been that aspect of commercial art or commercial creation. But there's a whole lot of people there that come from these traditions and study these songwriters and singer-songwriters and have so much in common. Over here, I'll never be, honestly, I just admire them, and I'll never be that cool. I mean, and I don't mean cool like in a disparaging or cool like how you look. I mean, wow, you said it in a way that it hit me. Like, that's what I've been wrestling with, or that's what I needed, or I just need somebody to sit with me and go through it, And so we need more of that over here. So the cross-pollination of these things is, in fact, good for everybody, because it lets this person know your thumbprint is so real that it will not be diluted if you let other people come in. You have to be careful, right? And make sure they're people you respect and admire and trust. But those people will sit with you and honor it.
They'll see you.
They'll see you. Yeah. So it takes both sides. It's very hard to learn to trust, but I feel like I've been really fortunate to get to work with all kinds, whether it's Marcus King, and I'm learning about what it takes to be a guitar slinger, or country and Western, or country that's not Western at all, and or someone like, an Ingrid taking me in and letting me be a part of that. We wrote this song on that record after Girls Chase Boys called The Old Days. I don't think anybody's ever heard it, but it was such a beautiful moment. She was processing loss. I was processing a different loss, and she didn't know that. And we started working on it, and then the bridge came, and I said, maybe it's not any words. And she just sang this thing, and then said, I'm sorry, but I never knew. And then she does this, she does those stacks that are like, and I just remember weeping in the room at like, I can't believe she just did that. How does she do that? And I still, it's, people say, well, what's a song you really love that you got to be a part of? And I think of that. I don't say it always because some people are like, what? But it really is, those moments are magic. And living for that moment, I've had to focus on that. I need to live for this moment. I have to understand that I don't know what's going to happen next. I can't control all of it, but I can be present and control this. I can help this. I'm preaching. I'm sorry.
This has been really helpful, I think, to me personally. And I think that when people hear this, they're going to feel inspired. And I think the people on my side of the river are going to feel like there's something on the other side of the river, maybe that they shouldn't tune out quite so quick. And maybe some people on the other side of the river might think, hey, let's come to the 5 spot and check this scene out a little bit. These weirdos got something to say after all.
They're amazing. It's beautiful.
I love the weirdos.
Well, we have this, East is represented, right? The Casey and Maren and Brothers Osbourne, friends of mine, all of them. So,
for sure.
I just think it's, and Lucy Silvas, and I'm thinking of John Green. And I mean, there's so many.
So many.
And they they can walk in that world, you know, but it still comes. I'm not good at dart throwing, at going, what does Jimmy Bob want to say today?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, unless Jimmy Bob's in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to do a lot better saying what's in the room and what we feel today. And I just wrote with a guy who's a kind of an independent artist, and he's had some success. And he said, what would your advice to me be if I was writing and pitching some songs to get cut by other people? And I said, only pitch the ones that you want to cut for yourself, because that'll keep you honest.
Mm.
When people come in and, you know, try to write country, and I would say the same thing about independent music, when you're talking about you're writing to express yourself and your identity and where you're going, and you're not thinking about, hopefully, radio or specifically what people are thinking of you. You're just reaching out to them and they will find your voice. Then I would say it's the same thing. You just have to make sure you put yourself into it. And if you'll do that, it'll go a lot further, you know. So that's what I've been trying to do. It's not always possible, but
it's great advice. Barry Dean, thank you so much for spending so much time. I don't even know how much time we've been talking.
I know I've rambled a long time. I don't know why. I'll understand if there's nothing useful here, but I love getting to see you again.
Same, dude.
That's great. And you know, you do that thing too, where like the book and all the things you do to express that, hey, I'm creative in lots of ways, not in just this way.
I'm just trying to, I'm honestly trying to find my way, just like a lot of us. And I don't know if it's this show that we wrote and made, if that's going to be the vehicle, or a book, or writing songs. I just love talent. I love seeing somebody do what they were supposed to do on planet Earth. I want to be around it. I want to help people do it. I love, when I tap into it myself, the occasions that happens, I just want to be back there again.
Right.
And the world, I feel like this all the time, is that the world is in just dire need of inspiration at all times. Just that, whatever that means, that's what it means. And for me, it means, like staying in touch with my own inspiration, and what gets me fired up. And what gets me fired up is talking to people like you and being around people like you and others who are wonderfully talented, and also have a burning, unquenchable thirst to do it again.
Yes, it is the second. You want to go back. You want that, and you may not get that every time, but you go back to that. You're chasing this thing. And did you always feel like free to do? Like I can do that. I can write a book if I need to write a book, or I need to. Did you feel that way, or you have to learn to be that way? Or?
I think that for me, I grew up in a very small town, and there was no competition, and so I just didn't know that you couldn't do that. I also, it's funny. My parents never listened to a record. All my music was from church, also. As a little kid, and I had my best friend growing up, his parents they were the coolest people in town. They had all the records, like, vinyl and CDs were back when that was happening. And, the dad, he recently passed, Osbourne, just had so many records. And that's how I got exposed to, Joni Mitchell and Neil Young and Dire Straits and these bands that, like, I was like 15 years old, 14 years old. And I just like woke up to this world of music. And I wanted to be part of it. The thing that I realized looking back that my parents gave me was this naive empowerment of just like, music was a part of life. Music was a thing that you did. You didn't have to be special.
Wow.
And that served me really well, for bad and good. Cause I'm getting better. I made 8 records and I've had I have a career.
Right.
So I guess I'm doing something right. But I look back at the record I made when I was 20 years old, and it's not good. It's not good. Wow. But I didn't know that it wasn't, and nobody told me that it wasn't. Not enough people told me that I wasn't, that it wasn't good, that I should stop doing it. And I think I enjoy playing guitar, and I don't exactly enjoy writing, but I really enjoy reading. And I noticed that especially as I've gotten older, I'm drawn more and more to big projects. I think that part of that's from phones being debilitating in a neurological way to me.
That's right.
It's too fast. It's too much. And participation in that as an indie singer-songwriter means a constant effort to raise your hand and ask for attention. And I just have intuited that for me, it might be good to step back from the constant melee and make one thing, however long that takes, and go, here's this thing for this year. And maybe make that an effort. And that's also because I've just been a big book nerd since I was a little kid. And I have a concurrent desire to be as involved in that world as the music one. So,
but it takes you to all these different places, and you don't know where the next one will be. And suddenly someone says, "Hey, what if you helped us with this kind of fashion?" And you'll be like, "Well, I've never done that." But that permission that goes, I can go do that, and I don't have to now, because I will see this sometimes, and I think that's true of everybody, but if they suddenly go, okay, well, I'm going to write a book, well, let me learn all the rules for the book. And the truth is, the great weapon they have is that beginner's mind, right? And the energy that goes, I'm going to just do this. If I wait for the editors to come along and all the other parts of my brain to kick in, I won't run. I have to, if I really want to create, I have to run towards creation, because everything else, from phones to just the way, the things I carry inside, will try to choke it out. So you have
beginner's mind is so fantastic. And it's, I noticed that, like everybody now, or like a lot of people, I speak Nashville numbers fluently, and I went to school to get, theoried all up. And when I listen to songs on the radio, I'm like 3, 6, 2, 4, 5. I just without even thinking about it, I'm like, oh, that was weird. They went from the 3 to the 4 minor there. You don't always hear that. That's kind of, but with that is gone some of the mystery, some of that wonderful mystery. And I noticed also there was about 8 years in there where all I really wanted to do was be Tony Rice. And I just I had a bluegrass band, and I was just like, I had my metronome on. I practiced like literally hours a day trying to get up there doing it. And I'd like learn the licks. I loved Norman Blake too, all those Norman Blake licks. And I'd hear something that would just wreck me on a CD. And I have to know it. And I'd sit there and I'd get it, and I'd get it so I could just play it perfectly. And as soon as I could play it, it was nice to have it in my hand, but with that was gone some of that crazy sparkle, that child. And I noticed that to myself. And, it's like, there's things that music that I'll listen to now, for my relaxation purposes or my inspiration purposes, I go to things like Bill Frisell, where it's, or something that's a little bit heady, that I'm kind of slow in my brain. And so when I get something like that, it's mysterious again. I love living in it, because I'm like, I can't solve that problem. I can't quite figure that out. And consequently, it can still live in this world of the ineffable. I really enjoy that. I don't know why I'm talking about that.
No, that it's like what we were talking about in the kitchen, because it's that thing where sometimes it overwhelms you and you suddenly aren't analyzing it. Hearing all the same song played the same way by the same band is sometimes how radio can feel, which any kind of radio. But then something will come through, and that one will catch you a different way, and it'll spin you around, and you'll go,
dude,
something just happened to me, right?
Just like Jesus Take the Wheel, the Carrie Underwood song. That song's still for me. I'm like, I cannot hear that song without just being like, God. It like punches me in the heart so hard. And who wrote that song? There's like
Gordy.
Gordy, I don't think Gordy's a Jesus Take the Wheel kind of guy.
No,
you know what
I
mean?
He's not. But I'll say, his album, his independent album, Sunburn, it came out, I don't know, early 2000s.
Yeah.
But that record, it influenced a lot of people, including me. Young, I was trying to get to town and heard that and thought, okay, if this is what all the songwriters are like in Nashville, holy moly. But he's really special. And, but again, I don't know if he's doing records still. I wish he would, and I still, I think that's important too, this idea of like, when you're saying, you're confronting situations and you have this need to respond to it by creating. And that having people around you and building a team and thinking, some of these have talked about the business side of it too, and as Jon, the attorney, he here is this guy who is lethal on the business side,
Mm-hmm.
but he's approaching it with a different spirit,
Mm-hmm.
driving behind it. So it's, it's obviously you're surrounding yourself with people who are like that and go, okay, well, I'm going to go this way and deal with my fear. All of it's really dealing with fear, I think. You just, what if I this? What if I look bad? What if I... And that's why I saw the Rick Rubin book behind me, and Rick Rubin and Eno before are all kind of getting at that same thing.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to do? Maybe the mistake you're making is your subconscious trying to help you find a way, right?
Mm-hmm.
That for me was a huge thought. I used to think it was all about perfection, that you mix and all of that. And Lori really broke me of that. We got some money to go in with some songs and had it. We did it like you're supposed to. We went to Ocean Way, had a huge band, and cut some songs. I remember looking at Lori and saying, "I think I just killed this song with my studio." And she laughed, but I was serious. And the next morning, Ryan, the engineer, and I met up, and I said, I think I hurt that, what she had created.
Mm.
And so we called it up, and we listened, and I said, I killed it.
Could you put your finger on what happened?
Yeah, because he really accidentally saved me. I had, I had Lori, and I understood her writing and her music and what was magical about her. And then we did a little EP, and it worked. And so then I went in the studio to do the actual thing. And this was already the actual thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that already, but I didn't. And so we went in and we did that session, and that particular song, I just said to Ryan, I don't like any of what I did. I made it worse. And I think it was called Rocket Science, that song. And I said, just mute it all. Just stop. And he pushed mute, or maybe he pushed solo. But what it came up with was the acoustic guitar and the piano. And those two session guys and all the noise I had set up, they were listening to one another. And they were listening to her. I don't know what was in their headphones, but I'm guessing it was just her and a click. And most of that record's not even to a click, by the way. But they created something beautiful. And I said, wait, wow, this is amazing. They didn't give up on me, even though I had given up. And so they were playing this thing. So I said, well, just leave that and put Lori in. And then there it was. And so then I said, okay, this is the way we mix from now on. We start with Lori, which is the old school way of mixing. You don't start with a kick, you start with a vocal. And we start with a vocal, and then everything has to support this moment. She is the jewel. Everything else is different songs. We're changing the production settings. We're trying to make this clear. This is what I want to see and hear. And so I really learned a lot from her, in that process. And I think, again, I'm sorry I had to learn it the hard way, but in the end, you could find the moments that the musicians felt like they had locked in and work with their magic instead of, I don't know, just all skating in the regular direction. We just find the way, find the light to shine on that thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you're doing that in so many places. If you're the shows and the writing and the songs and music and records, and it's amazing. I really have just one lane that I work in that way, but sometimes in the business lane, it's not the same. But there is the collaboration that I've learned here is, it does change the way you build a company and build a team.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm rambling.
This is fantastic. That was the longest sign off that happened 20 minutes ago.
I'm sorry. Let's do the sign off again. I'll be quiet.
No.
Shut up. You do a real sign off.
No, that was the sign off. Barry, thank you so much for your time. I can't wait to see you again.
So
maybe someday we can write a song together.
Yes, I would love it. Actually, genuinely love it. I'm sorry we haven't until now.
Well,
so we'll get it fixed.
I look forward to that.
Yeah, we'll get it fixed.
Hey, thanks for watching. Go ahead and click here to like and subscribe. You can click right there to watch another video, or click here to watch a playlist featuring the songs of the Morse Code podcast. Okay, thank you very much.